In this video, we'll look at how to create dynamic equations using algorithmic variables. If you're unfamiliar with algorithms, take a look at the Algorithmic Basics video. Here's an example of how you might use algorithmic equations. Suppose that I want to create a true-false question about perfect squares. This is the equation I want. I want a perfect square under the square root symbol on the left side of the equation and its square root on the right side of the equation. I've already created two variables. Let's select the Tools menu to take a look at them, and then Variable Definitions to look at the variables. The first variable is called myRand. It uses the rand function to select a random number between 1 and 30. This is the number that I'm going to put on the right side of the equal sign. The second variable, mySquare, uses the myRand variable multiplied by itself. This will create a perfect square. This is the variable that goes under the square root symbol. When you're placing variables into equations, you need to be careful about which functions you use in your variables. There is a group of functions that generate pictures instead of numbers or text strings. The two variables I've created in my example question will always generate numbers. Here are the built-in functions that may display images instead of numbers, depending on their values: decimal, square root, fraction, mixed number, reduced fraction, and the small versions of the fraction, mixed numbered, and reduced fraction variables, which generate smaller images of those variables. Here are some examples of the image functions so that you can see what they look like. Notice that I have a variable that uses the decimal function, and the value of the variable is set to 1/7. Since 1 divided by 7 is a repeating decimal, the function creates an image instead of a numeric value so that it can display the overbar indicating the repeating part of the decimal. The square root function will display an image of a number under the radical symbol if the value of the function isn't a perfect square. The fraction and mixed number functions will display images of fractions or mixed numbers if the value doesn't reduce to a whole number. Because the equations you create in the equation editor are images, you cannot insert other images into them. If you place an image variable in an equation and the values of the parameters in that variable cause it to generate an image, you will see a broken image in the question. Therefore, you shouldn't use image variables in equations. Now we know what functions to avoid. Let's use the existing variables to create our equation for the rest of the question. In the question, I'll click the Insert Equation button to open the equation editor. From the palette, I'll select the square root symbol to insert it into my equation. In the equation editor, you can enter static values or variable names. When you enter variable names, you want to make sure that you enter them as regular text. So after clicking inside the square root symbol, we'll click the regular text button. To insert a variable into an equation, type the variable name surrounded by two pound signs or hashtags. For example, pound pound, mySquare, pound pound. I'll click OK to save the equation and insert it into the question. Notice that when you first insert an algorithmic equation, the variable name displays instead of the value of the variable. We can fix that by recalculating the variable or clicking OK to save the question. Because I'm not done writing my question, I'm going to go ahead and recalculate the variable so I can see the value in the equation. Let's click Tools. Then we'll click Recalculate Variables. Now we see the current value of the variable under the square root symbol. Next, we'll build the rest of the equation by inserting the variable for the square root on the other side of the equation. To quickly add a variable to a question, type the variable name surrounded by two pound signs on either side, just like we did in the equation editor. The variable that contains the square root value is named myRand. So I'll type pound pound, myRand, pound pound. When a variable is in the text of the question, you will see the variable name when you're looking at the Design tab. To see the value of the myRand variable in the question, let's go to the Preview tab. Since we just added this variable to the question, we need to recalculate it to see the value in the question. Now we can see the square root of 169 equals 13. Let's recalculate the variables again. Now we have square root of 1 equals 1. That's correct as well. I'm going to change the correct answer to true. Since writing algorithms is very similar to programming, it's a good idea to spend some time recalculating the variables and making sure that the values calculate as you expect them to. Let's recalculate a couple more times. Everything seems to be working fine. And that's how you can add variables to your equations to make them dynamic.